Hey everybody, Ian Bremmer here, and a quick take to kick off your week. And it's now Los Angeles that we are looking at. Wasn't on anyone's bingo card last week, but now it is. And specifically, President Trump deploying 2,000 members of the California National Guard to assist with the Department of Homeland Security's deportation operations in Los Angeles. Big protests against deportations across the city, mostly peaceful, some violent. No reason to believe that the police department is incapable of handling it themselves, but certainly lots of political reason for Trump to insert him against himself and his own orders against those of illegal immigrants in the United States. It's an extreme measure, to be sure. The National Guard has not been deployed without a governor's consent since 1965 in Alabama, where LBJ was opposing then Governor Wallace in ensuring that civil rights demonstrators would be protected. This is obviously very different kind of politics and in support of very different issues, but nonetheless reflecting of where the country and where a majority of the population is increasingly oriented, not in becoming more progressive and supporting more rights for disenfranchised Americans, but instead in securing the border and in doing more to go after those that are in the United States illegally. So a very different time, a very different context, and a very different president. Now, to be clear, insofar as the National Guard troops are only assisting with other federal operations rather than conducting their own law enforcement operations and not taking offensive actions against protesters, this does not in any way cross the boundaries of the president's legal authority. And critically here, Trump has not invoked the Insurrection Act, which would authorize the deployment of regular military forces against protesters. And the fact that he hasn't done that, I think, is important because there is, at least, and has been, a very high threshold for invoking that act. And we saw that from Trump back in 2020 in an interview around the George Floyd protests. Now, the fight over deportation operations is also one that Trump really wants to have, and this is very similar to the fight over illegally sending a illegal migrant to El Salvador despite federal orders, federal court orders, not to do so. It's like the Harvard case. So many cases here where Trump is pushing the boundaries because he wants to force domestic political opposition into supporting some adversaries that are not in any way sympathetic to the majority of the population, and turning the news away from other fights that are more problematic for Trump. In the case of the last few days, of course, Trump versus Elon, which has not gotten fixed yet, at least. And the optics in Los Angeles are particularly useful for Trump. You've got protesters that are burning cars and flying Mexican flags, and this isn't like flying Israeli flags in a protest. That's something that Trump wouldn't have a problem with. But Mexican flags, absolutely a fight he wants to have. And in that regard, you're trying to validate the Trump administration's narrative that undocumented individuals and their defenders are operating inside the United States against American interests. So anything he can do to lean into that politically, he likes. Trump's approval ratings on immigration continue to be quite positive in the context of how he is doing on broader issues across the board. And they certainly want to use this political capital to conduct more controversial moves like larger scale workplace raids, and that images from the protests are going to make the public more hesitant. in siding with protesters against the White House. Keep in mind, Trump has done a lot to get the border secure and to stop illegal immigrants from coming into the U.S., but so far he's done very little in terms of taking illegal immigrants out of the United States, and he understands that that is politically more controversial, so being seen as going after protests as they occur, even though illegal immigrants might only be a very small number of those that are actually protesting, is something that is very useful for Trump's political agenda. What else might he do? I mean, the fact that he's deploying the National Guard without the governor's consent and accusing the protesters of rebellion does open questions of what other emergency powers Trump might be thinking about. So, for example, could be used to sanction individual Americans under IEPA, could try to control internet platforms directly using the Communications Act. I think that anyone that thinks that those are impossible are not considering whether they would have said the same about authorizing the National Guard within 150 days of Trump becoming president this time around, when the governor and other political leaders are saying we don't want anything to do with this. So, they've been very creative, they've been very aggressive with other laws, and I certainly think that the willingness, the threshold for activating those laws would be very low. More broadly, I think that immigration-related protests are going to be a major source, perhaps the main source, of civil unrest in the United States over the coming months. We're going to see a lot more confrontation over deportations. As that happens, because the White House wants to get those numbers up, you're going to need to see much more frequent raids in neighborhoods, in workplaces, and that's going to be seen as disruptive to civil society, in some cases very disruptive to the economy, and a lot of people are scared. Some will be picked up wrongly by mistake. We've already seen some of that, including back in New Bedford, Massachusetts, close to where I grew up. And that also is going to create, I think, more likelihood of unrest, some of which will be violent. And if Trump responds in a very public and aggressive way, the likelihood of that violence goes up. It also brings the White House much more into conflict with state and local officials that are Democrats, because, again, this is a fight that Trump is very interested in having. We saw some of that in New Jersey last month. We're seeing California now. This is going to become much more of a salient issue as we start thinking about primaries for midterm elections. And the potential for all of that to create more disruption, especially in urban areas in Democratic states, including my own New York City, are very plausible. That's very different from saying that we expect an economic disruption, which is actually, I think, very unlikely in this environment, much less so than what we've seen on trade and what is still coming down the pike from all of the challenges with supply chain. So overall, big political issue, potential upside for Trump, danger, frankly, for the Democrats to get too vested in this, and that's why he's leaning in. Trade, exactly the opposite, and why I expect from the White House leaning into this issue a lot more over the coming weeks and months. That's it for me, and I'll talk to you all real soon.